Growing up in India in a very small town in the 70s and 80s, what was it like? One, it was a completely different world then, or so it feels like. When we were young, the world was, yes, a bit different. At least the little world that we lived in. But I guess that was like a long, long, long time ago in a small town where everyone down the street at least knew each other's names. It mattered when somebody died, and everyone celebrated when a little one was born. We really didn't know enough about other religions to hate the differences. We definitely didn't understand the differences, but we knew just about a little to become curious to know more. Hindus would happily send their children to an all night carol singing during Christmas. The Ganesh Chaturthi procession would stop at the corner Muslim store so that he could pay his respects, and everyone groaned when the local Kali temple blared during exam times, irrespective of which religion they belonged to. Tiffin boxes were opened at school during lunch hours, where we would all sit around, in a small circle and to share and eat. And most people sort of brought vegetarian fare, I guess, so that they could share, more easily. Eyes would roll if someone brings, meat, eggs, chicken, or, it was open, and then everybody or someone would shift places in a very touchy manner and feel very all, angry or upset. But strangely, there was nothing religious or even us versus them in that. Next time they would just sit beside someone else just to avoid a repeat, occurrence or experience. So we all learned somewhere to respect the differences and sort of get along. And we had also the maturity to know that just because somebody ate something didn't mean that you reject them as a totality. You just didn't eat with them, but then you would talk something else with them over something else. Um, so the whole idea was to have maybe, if at all, issue based differences rather than other kinds of differences. Everybody would attend, or at least the people that I know, considerable amount of them from my road or around my area, would attend the convent school where every day, we had a different prayer that would be read out and a quote from various religious texts. And we also had some songs with nearly every religion in it so that nobody felt offended or left out. So you had a bit about Hinduism, you had a bit about Islam, you had Christianity, you had Buddhism, you had Zoroaster, even, uh, so you had a lot of mentions, and all of it was treated with an equal amount of respect. The majority were people from very ordinary homes. So, really, no one flaunted their wealth because there weren't very many that were extremely wealthy. And even the few that were really extremely rich, somehow they stopped showing off as they were very anxious to fit in with the rest. Yeah, some had fancier bags, better geometry boxes, water cans with straw and all of that. And, that's a big thing. But the lovely part was that, everybody wore, or most of them at least wore 28 rupee Bata shoes to school and the same boring uniforms, patched or new. Well, I wore one from 6th standard to 12th, the same skirt. I had only two. That's a different story. So neighborhoods taught you glorious sharing. Two people would have a cricket bat, and 20 people would pull in and get a cricket ball, and the damage and the collective abuse was borne by all. So everyone shamelessly would crowd into some neighbor's home to watch TV. Sometimes almost about 50 people collectively felt they owned the right to linger in someone's home, even as late as 12 in the night. Somehow, cricket matches meant that it was universal common viewing. Open air theatre meant the films projected by the free wall beside Velu Cycle Store. So we had a cycle store called Velu Cycle Store, which is about very close to the Kaliamman temple street and somewhere perpendicular to where I used to live. And during the temple festival, a treat meant walking to the local park, which was free, or this open air film, which was actually a film projected on a giant wall beside Velu Cycle Store. So summer treats meant State Express milk and mango duets. A telephone in your house was like an absolute luxury, and a nuisance. That meant that you have to, sort of pass messages on. And a telegram usually meant that somebody was getting married, or somebody had died, or was unwell. Plastic was so minimal that, we had not really heard of things like pollution, or really not learned to spell it yet. The local unused well was large enough to hold all the Ganesha that, every year that we would throw. And colored Ganeshas were almost really that time unheard of. And everybody got the same boring clay ones that melted very easily. Maybe I remember that after a particular period, we did have some with that light bit of gold or silver or something. But predominantly it used to just be the normal clay ones. During local festivals at the temple, there was a big Ganesh temple, Vinayakar, we call it in Tamil Nadu. So there was a big temple just about 10 buildings away from where I used to live, the place where I was born and raised and spent half of my life. So during Pongal, the local festivals at the temple meant Rangoli competitions. So we learned to use, during Pongal also, another thing that we used to do was we learned how to, use our teeth and then spit and demolish large pieces of sugar cane. We learned art appreciation by, just what if you take a walk down a road, you have a class in art appreciation, because you walk the breadth of the road to see whose house was adorned with the biggest rangolis, or kolam as we call it in Tamil. So which was the biggest, who did it better, and some people would repeat, some people had a style, particular style. So it was always very fascinating, and it almost, I think, almost even very competitive. And even the time, no, every day we actually used to clean the front yard, and then you pour water over it, clean it fully. You sweep it and then water it, and then you put this rangoli. And it's usually done very early, and even a slightest delay would get my mom very agitated, because she'll say, like, what would the others think that today we are so late? I mean, this is ridiculous. So it used to be like that. So that's about the admiration of Rangoli down the road, and the columns down the road, and how festival time meant that we literally became art critics of sorts. And Diwali meant preening with new clothes, and of course collecting burnt cracker papers from other people's homes and putting it in front of us so that people think that we burst them. Well, I never had, unfortunately, enjoyed having many crackers bought for me when growing up, because ours was a large family, and really we didn't have that much of scope for any extravagance. So I remember I had an elder brother, a brother just above me in age, and so he would go around and spot the houses with the maximum, paper clutter. And my job is to, I was just about 5 when he was around 10. So my job is to go along with him and pick up all that rubbish, because he would feel very ashamed to do that, and I was his little assistant. So, and then we would come and put it all in front of our house. And talking about even neighbors and neighborhood, it's actually the opposite house to mine. They had about 5 children, and their uncles who used to visit during Diwali, they were so kind, because they would always include me as almost like another cousin or another girl of their house, and get me also some crackers and stuff like that. So it was always about extended family and care. Um, so yeah, so Diwali meant preening with new clothes, and yeah, collecting some burnt cracker papers from other people's homes and putting it in front of us. And then, you know what luxury was? A shampoo bath versus the normal shikakai arapu. If you know about it, shikakai, um, I'm sure most of you all know, soap nut, and all of that. So those were the regular. We used to have really oil baths, and then you have your hair oiled nicely, and then you put all these powders and then take it out, and most of the time all those powders will still be there in your head, and you're not going to have very silky beautiful hair. Actually, we had healthier hair, but at that age we really didn't know that, right? All you wanted was that very silky feeling. And so luxury was a shampoo bath, and very few people bought shampoo, uh, you know, bottles, because it was very expensive. And then somebody had this big revolutionary idea of bringing out sachets, and then India changed forever. So, and tasting Maggie, which is now such an integral part of Indian uh, food, junk food, whatever you want to call it, snack. But that time, Maggie was just launching. So, tasting Maggie meant free samples from school. So, they would actually come to school and give us all free samples, and then we'd come home and then we experiment with it and stuff like that. Bubblegum was a stupid not 7 until Big Fun came on, because not 7 was very tough and leathery and very difficult to chew, and Big Fun suddenly brought it in all vibrant colors, and then you could actually blow bubbles with Big Fun, so it was kind of a very big thing. So we would actually also blow bubbles with our spit and play with the small insects that you'll find in the thorn bushes, and even blowing bubbles with our spit. um, it was usually not considered a good thing for girls to do. And my brother taught me how to do it that time. And my father would get so angry. He would actually come and hit us like this to stop making bubbles with our spit. So yeah, we would be blowing bubbles with our spit, and we'll play with the small insects that you'll find in the thorn bushes. They actually used to look like aliens. You could just catch them and then they run over your skin like that, and you take them to school and make them run races and stuff like that. So weekends meant, also hiding in the tree house, in the cherry tree that my father made, safe from the world. So we had a beautiful garden, and my love for gardening, plants, nature completely is inherited from my father. And he must have spent almost all his free time in the garden. And I used to be his little assistant. I will probably be doing another episode on all the trees and plants of my childhood. So I was my father's assistant, who would run around picking all the fallen coconuts from the ditches and trying to earn some pocket money, really, really small money. But he actually built a beautiful, like just with planks, he had made something like a tree house, and we had a very beautiful cherry tree. I've never seen a tree like that anywhere else in India, but that was like amazing at for that time. Since he was a hybrid scientist, and he used to get a lot of these very offbeat plants and then put them at home and experiment with them. So there was a plank that he had put in, and you could get into that space, and then it becomes a tree house, and it becomes like literally your safe haven from the world. We bought new clothes twice a year as a rule, and everybody looked forward to it. It was an occasion, and then everybody went together to shop. Since budgets would apply, you ended up equally keen to know how much was spent on whom. So you had to literally get the breakdown. Most meals were eaten together. Not because it was very loving and families wanted to stick together, but it's purely to ensure that there's a fair distribution, and that, everybody ate, at least got some food. And also some of the fancier foods at least was ensure that everybody gets at least some portion of it, and nobody gets 2 or 3 helpings of it. And also some of the ones that are bitter or sour or things that you don't like to eat, well, they made sure that everybody had them too. And most meals were also eaten together, because we had a lot of power cuts those days. So what would usually happen is that most of the time they were candlelight dinners, so it made sense for the whole family to sit together at one go and have a meal. We looked forward to festivals. We grumbled at rituals because mother would work herself up, and there were lots of rules and regulations and taboos around festivals. So festivals were not normally, most of the festivals were very tough on children, meaning they were not fun and free, flowing kind of festivals. They were rigid with a lot of rules of do's and don'ts and things that you couldn't do. But nevertheless, it was still something that, it was different from the norm. So you kind of looked forward to it. So we would look forward to the festivals. We'll grumble in the rituals. We will lawlessly roam the streets, shamelessly sponge on food at any house that gave us any. So I remember that most of the time we would come home by maybe around 9ish or something. So, it was more about making sure that we try to stay indoor, rather than the reverse nowadays, where we try to push the kids out to go and play. So we sponged on any food that was from any house that gave us any. We could walk into like literally any house. If they're having a meal, they say, what, join along. And then we would sit with them, eat, and then come home and eat another meal, whatever. We just had the capacity to literally eat whatever was given and in whatever quantities. And we played also anywhere and came home at any time, unless you counted the times that, you ran in and out home to gulp some water, and they will be like, "What are you doing?" And by the time they finish that sentence, you're out of the house again and running. Chitrahar and the daily soaps were very avidly watched and discussed at school, because you know what? Everybody watched the same things. And Sundays meant waiting for some movie from your language. And people, those of you hearing or watching this from outside India, we have tons of languages in India. And this, what I'm discussing, is when we had only a national television before the advent of satellite television. So almost everybody had to watch the same things. And on Sundays, we used to have Sunday afternoons were for regional cinema. So you would actually be waiting, because usually it's done in the alphabetical order. So you would be eagerly waiting to see what film would be you would get to see, because most people never went to the movies or the cinema theaters very often, unless it's pretty, it's a culture in your house. So most of us would wait for that Sunday afternoon matinee. And it will also mean for some movie from your language to come during the afternoon show. And sometimes they'll put some really old, boring movie, and you're like, oh, I have to wait for another almost 2-3 months before they come to my language again, because we have a lot of languages in India. And sometimes they'll skip your language, and then you're like, oh no. So we also learned a lot of other languages, at least the sound of it that way, and that their cultures as you waited for your turn, because you had nothing else to do. So you ended up watching a lot of things because we didn't have a choice. And not having the choice was excellent, because it actually gave us exposure. So you preened when you could hire a VCR, and then felt savvy when you could fix it in front of the impatient family so that it ran. And those are the days of antenna. So most of us, your youngsters, will have to go up to the terrace and then turn around the antenna in the direction that you'd get the signal, and somebody from down would be yelling whether they're getting the picture right. And so much of drama around daily life. It's just insane. So a meal became a candlelight dinner. A middle of something, you would have the antenna that would change direction. Just in the middle of a match, it would be windy or the power would go. Everything was always something crazy. You just didn't have a normal day. Or maybe that was the normal. And then we read books. We read books. We read them at school, walking back from school, exchanging books, stealing books, making a hole under the covers even. These were the windows to the world. All the things far off, with wide eyes and, longing. We would read until we had burning eyes, but the imagination was vivid. And the edge that we had with our reading was far more than, those with fancier cars or scooters. We waited for the holidays, did not have toys, played with the air, the mud, our imagination. Somehow, the hours would just flow by, and we wouldn't even know. We were rarely bored, and in any case, we never expected, adults to do anything about it, because it's our business to keep ourselves entertained. Yeah. And there we were, innocent, naive, not really knowing any other world than the little world that we lived in. Well, it does sound very romanticized. In the same period, I knew death at the age of 5. The second death that I encountered at the age of 12. I'm sure every one of us would have had our own stories at that point. What I am wanting to share is a world that seemed, amidst a lot of other things, a lot simpler, a lot more of give and take, a lot more of adjustments. Looking back, I think we learned tolerance, sharing, curiosity, resourcefulness, appreciation. We valued insecurity of a kind that we can only dream of today. Most of the time, I remember that we would steal a little from each house and then try to cook a meal outside. There is a whole bunch of crazy stories that I'm bringing out in the form of another book, which is about all the naughty things I did as a child, including shaving my eyebrows off. Yes, indeed. But that is for another episode maybe, and another format. I wanted to share that looking back, it feels like we had a really rich childhood. One that I am happy that I at least could give partly to my son. I think he belongs to a particular generation which is probably the last to enjoy that kind of almost similar life that I enjoyed as a child. But most kids nowadays, they have fancier homes, they have cars, they have toys, every toy under the sun, grand birthdays, fantastic holiday trips, and everything you can name. But somehow, in spite of it all, when I look at it, all I can say is, poor little rich kids. Because I think we had something that is and was very fragile and very beautiful. We can definitely not go back to those times because we've expanded as a world, as people. But I think some ingredients of that is still there in people like me. I have passed that to my son, and I'm hopeful that some seeds of that would have gone or would be given to his children. I hope that every one of you are listening around my age, maybe the ones who have also a few decades or born later, you probably would have had some parts of the same kind of a life. And this is quite also universal across the world. I think most children born in the 70s or 80s, who were growing up in the 70s or 80s, would resonate to a large part. Most of us didn't have very fancy clothes. Meals were tough, simpler. There was a lot of, I think, resourcefulness that our parents really had to do. But beneath it, it was to a great extent a better world. And there are things from that world which I think we should probably pull back into this new world of ours. And now we have a way to share these to more people. And that is power, because when we relate what was beautiful, and I'm not even sharing this just as something of nostalgia, I'm talking about this as something that's true and timeless and beautiful and necessary to bring back. Somewhere there is a certain simplicity, a certain innocence, a certain give and take, and a certain tolerance, which is so needed today. Here is to happier, more innocent times for all of us.